learn to kind of read what a restaurant and what a kitchen's rhythm is, so you don't want to be the guy that comes in and works at a pace that's 80% of what everyone else is giving, because you're never going to get ahead that way.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. We've talked about the challenges of sustainability, sourcing local, and running a business that's profitable and keeps people coming back for more. But what's it like running a restaurant considered as one of the very best in the world with a modus operandi of only using organic, biodynamic, and wild foods? Jay Boyle is the executive chef of Maaemo in Oslo, Norway. Jay, how are you, mate?
Very, very well. Very well. How are you?
Good. It's good to get you on the show. I know it's early over there in Oslo at the moment, but how are things over there?
Very, very good. We're having a very busy summer at the moment, so nothing at all to complain about.
Soon you're going to be back in Australia to do a series of dinners with Brian Garrity at Barara Waters. And I know you guys have hooked up before. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
So basically, we did this 2 years ago, not at the same scale. I would say we didn't quite know what we were necessarily stepping into. We wanted to cook together for a weekend, and it blew up into something a little bit bigger than we had thought. And kind of what we took away from it was that obviously I can't bring anything with me through a little bit risky coming through customs with reindeer hearts and raw oysters and whatnot. So we got a lot of substitutes, and instead of using spruce, we use Geraldton wax and things like that. And that turned out to be the absolutely most interesting thing for both of us. There was tasting through all of the native ingredients and things. So this time around, we really wanted to do it again, but to really lean into that part of it, to make it something that could really only exist in Barara. So obviously based in what we're doing here in Oslo, but to have a very distinct kind of fingerprint that is 100% Australia.
It's really interesting because it's hard to move a restaurant and completely replicate what you do. But I guess the way that you're going about it is to replicate the approach that you have. What's it been like for you, sort of exploring the native ingredients and the ingredients that sort of you want to use on the menu here? Has that sort of been interesting for you?
Very, very. I mean, the last time we got to taste sort of an incredible amount of different things that I was just blown away by. So this time around, obviously, I haven't had a chance to taste a lot of the things that we're talking about. But I trust Brian. We've known each other for a long time. I trust his palate. So he's gotten absolutely a huge list of different things. So once I get in, we start tasting through everything, figure out what we can use out of what we've planned, and maybe what doesn't work or what needs a little bit of tweaking. So it's quite nerve-wracking, I say, but very, very exciting. Yeah.
I want to explore sort of what you are doing out here and maybe a dish or two in detail in a little while. But tell us a little about Maaemo. You've been there since the beginning, and it's had an extraordinary history, and now 3 Michelin stars. You're one of the very few Australian chefs sort of running the kitchen of a 3 Michelin star restaurant. Tell us about what you guys are doing there.
So, as a backstory, Maaemo opened in December 2010. I came actually a couple of years after that, but So it opened. Espen Holmboe is the sort of chef owner. So when he opened up Maaemo, the ambition was to be the first or completely organic Michelin-starred restaurant in the world. And that sounds a little bit like a given now. Organic, biodynamic. It's good produce. Whether you think that things make sense or not. I think everyone can agree that when you farm that way, you do it with more care. So you're going to get a better product at the end of it, regardless of the ethics of it. So, but Norway in that point was a little bit sort of organic was almost a bit of a dirty word. That was for sort of rich people, and the organic section in the supermarket was incredibly small. So the first years of Maimo was really about building an actual supply network and finding people that wanted to work in that way. Espen had to commit to taking 100 liters of milk a week just to be able to get organic milk. And Maimo was actually the reason that you can buy 1 liter boxes of organic milk to begin with, because otherwise it was only produced on industry scale in 10-liter boxes. So that's how Maaemo started, and we were very dogmatic about only using Norwegian ingredients, only using organic, biodynamic, or wild. We've sort of, I would say now we've broadened the spectrum a little bit. We also have a restaurant in Shanghai called EHB. That's a couple of years old, and since we started going over there, we've been a little bit more comfortable, maybe bringing back a couple of outside influences, a touch of spice here and there, but it's still very. We are a restaurant that you will only find in Oslo. We can't replicate that what we do exactly anywhere else.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of some of the ingredients or dishes maybe that you have on at the moment there that sort of exemplifies your approach?
Yeah. So we have. I would say one of the really great examples of what we do was a dish that just left the menu, but so we're getting incredible langoustines. From a small island called Midsen. And I think Maaemo has always been quite known for having a langoustine dish. But over the years, we've been able to build up really, really great relationships with suppliers. So I believe that Norway has the best langoustines in the world, without competition, I say. So we have just an incredible langoustine. Each tail that we get, it cleaned up, it weighs 130, 140 grams. So we try to cook that very simply, and sort of everything around that should support it. So we spent years figuring out the exact way that we like to grill a langoustine tail. So it looks like an incredibly simple dish. Spoonful of sauce, perfectly grilled langoustine tail. But behind that is we cover it with the glaze of cured egg yolks, and we cure the egg yolks in our own cashew miso that's a year old, and the sauce is based on roasted spelt and meadowsweet, and the meadowsweet had to be preserved last year. So it all looks very, very simple, but it's a dish that took all 15 years of the restaurant to figure out how to make so simple.
That's an amazing example of dedication to produce. Tell us about 3 Michelin stars. We know globally that it's considered the pinnacle. But what's it like actually the day-to-day for you? And, once you obtain something like that, does it change the way you operate? Does it, what's it like in a 3 Michelin star restaurant for you?
I think for us, the the third star is it gave us, in a way, sort of confidence and confirmation about what we do. There's no second guessing for us about whether something is good enough. We know that it is, so I know that there is a sort of this cliche that, once you get the third star, that's when the restaurant becomes boring, because then you play business. But we're not like that. We're sort of still constantly evolving. We still want to push to the next best thing that we can do. So the third star in that respect has been incredible positive for our creativity, because we're very comfortable and secure in what we're doing. So we have that sense of adventure still, but with the confirmation that we know that we're doing the right thing when we do it. But the sort of day to day is also a very big. We all feel the responsibility of it, and we know how much it affects sort of guest expectation. And obviously, it lets us operate at a certain price point, which demands that we respect what the guests that we have coming in. They're paying a lot of money. They have high expectations. We get to be in this sort of beautiful restaurant every day, but you have to remind yourself constantly that even though we get to experience it every day, the guests, they maybe have one shot in their entire life to come and eat with us, and they expect us to be, great. They expect the best dinner of their life, and you have to try and live up to that for every guest, every service. So I think that's maybe the biggest pressure each day.
How do you manage that pressure, not only for yourself, but for your whole team who you need to get the best out of?
We have a very small and very good team. Most of the team has been with us, a couple of years at a time. We have a very small staff rotation, so everybody is there. They know the pressure already. They're all sort of on board with what that means. So, of course, we remind about it, but everybody already kind of knows, and you see the seriousness, and you see how everybody takes it on their own shoulders and make sure they give their best every day. So it's sort of a culture that you need to foster constantly, but we know that we have good people. We know that they know the mission. That makes sense.
Yeah. I'm interested in the creative process there. The langoustine dish is a great example of how long it can take to sort of get a dish to where you want it to be, and no doubt that'll evolve further as well. But what's the creative process in the kitchen there? I know you're executive chef and Espen's the owner, but is there a collaboration going on with the food?
Yeah, so basically we... for the menu changes now, we switch the entire menu every 3 months. So we have a kind of a set process now in a way, and schedule. So the first thing that happens is that we make a kind of a framework of what we think the entire menu for the next season should be. Before we do any cooking whatsoever, we'll have a complete menu written down with, if not every component that we think is going to be on something, but every flavor that we think that should work, and things that fit with everything else on there, so that we don't have repeated ingredients or two dishes that are too heavy or too light next to each other. So Espen and I sit down, we work out all of that. We figure out if there's anything that we want to use product-wise for the season that's coming up, or any new ingredients or suppliers that we found that we want to support, and then we start going into the testing phase. So that's kind of my my everyday responsibility for about 2 months at a time, and then we taste every time I have something kind of at a point where I think it's either ready for the menu or needs another perspective to push it to be ready. We taste together. We go over everything that we like or don't like, and then we either sort of box it off and sign off on the recipes, tweak it, or we go back to the drawing board completely.
Yeah. Well, I want to explore what you're going to do in Australia very soon with their amazing dinner at Barara Waters. But you're originally from Australia. Take us back to when you were young. Whereabouts did you grow up, and did food play a role for you in your family growing up?
I grew up in Newcastle, and then when I was 10 or 11, we moved up to Port Stephens. So quite, small and cozy place to live. I don't know necessarily if food played a huge part in growing up. I think I have a lot of the sort of very Aussie memories. We had a lot of barbecues and a lot of well done steaks and all of that. But I think one thing that I really love is the memories of going with Dad and grabbing a pie and sitting down on the beach and things like that. Cooking was not really something I was interested in. Food was just food, and I think we had the pretty standard Aussie sort of 90s repertoire of spaghetti bolognese and curried sausages and things like that.
Where did you sort of first get a foot in the door in the hospitality sector and consider chefing as a career?
I was a little bit of a late starter. I had no idea really what I wanted to do with my life for a while. So I was over here in Norway. My wife is Norwegian. We've been together for 20 years now, and so I was washing dishes for a company called Adecco. It's like a relief company. You get sent for a day here or 3 days there, and it's generally they sort of work in canteens and things like that. And I remember I turned up one evening at the NATO base in Stavanger, and amazing! The chef is here, and I was too young and stupid to say no. So I think they showed me how to fry off like frozen pork chops in this huge brat pan, and said, go for it.
Wow.
So that's was my first experience, and I think I ended up staying there for about 6 months. So doing basic kitchen things, but finally I felt like I found something I really enjoyed, and decided that I would go to cooking school. And it wasn't really an option to do it over here, because then I needed to do 2 years, like doing end of high school stuff, Norwegian and maths and all of that. So I decided to go back to Sydney. I went to the Cordon Bleu, and then made a good impression on I think some of the chef lecturers there, and then they pushed me into good restaurants after that, and I had no ambition of working in fine dining or anything. I had no idea what that was. So my first job out of cooking school, or at the end on the industry placement, was Rockpool Bar and Grill. And then that was, a brand new world of what produce can be, and everything from meat, fish, shellfish, but also to see the care that went into sourcing the carrots and zucchinis and things like that. It was absolutely incredible. And I was there for 6 months just on my placement, and a lot of that stuff just has stuck with me forever. It was an incredibly serious kitchen to work in. The scale of everything was huge, but to see the care that went into everything, even when you were doing 450 guests a day was eye-opening.
Did that change your perspective on what your career could be, that time at Rockpool?
Absolutely. Yeah, that was, I think that was when I realized that I wanted to actually be serious about it. Instead of just, getting a decent job cooking something somewhere, you know. That changed my perspective on what it could be, and also how everything could taste. It was an incredible place to do the placement in.
You also spent some time at the legendary Bilson's. Tell us about that.
So one of the guys that I was in school with, he got into Bilson's for his placement, and so that was just around the corner from Rockpool. So we used to meet up and grab a beer after service, and so I got to know the Bilson's team as well. And then he was going to go on a 2-week holiday, I think, to the UK, and so they needed someone to fill in on his section. So I went in after I was done at Bilson's. I went in for a 1-month stage there, and after that month, they offered me a job, and decided to stay on. So I wasn't there for a long time. I think I was there for maybe 4 or 5 months in total. But again, that was stepping into a different world again.
I've been in the kitchen at Bilson's. It's tiny, especially compared to Rockpool. What was it like going from the Rockpool kitchen and seeing all the diners sort of while you're cooking to that tiny little kitchen at Bilson's?
I thought Rockpool was really hard, and then I went to Bilson's, and I realized that Rockpool was very easy compared to the things that we did at Bilson's in that small space with a small team was just ridiculous, really. That was when Diego Munoz had just come in, so he'd been there for a couple of months, and I think he'd just come back from Abui and Mugaritz, and I can still remember I had this prawn consomme on my section, and the ingredient list was mega. It was like 30 different things in this consomme, and everything was scaled out to percentages of you're going to put in 0.01% of this and 0.2% of salt, and the seasoning was not left up to the individual in a way. Everything was really nailed down to the recipe. So that was also incredibly different for me, and learning how to work that way was that's stayed with me, because you really had to motor when you were there. If you came in at 7 and you weren't running from that moment, you were in trouble. I was in trouble anyway. I was completely dead in the shit every single day that I was there. I remember Diego used to pull us all over to the pot wash, and we would stand around in a circle with our bowls and eat star food, and he'd make sure we all ate, and then he'd look at us and tell us, now you need to drink a glass of water. And then we would just all run back to our stations because we were buried constantly.
I know you mentioned that you were only there for a short period of time, but a very important period of time. Do you have any stories of any interactions with the late, great Tony Bilson during that time?
Tony was kind of in and out a little bit. So, and I was very young, so I didn't quite get to have so much to do with him. But I do remember the first time I met him, and he came through, and I was picking. I think I was picking lemon thyme for like a lemon thyme and grapefruit marmalade to go with John Dory. Came in, he looked at it. He didn't really say anything to me, and then he looked at Diego and he was, "What's this?" Diego said, "Lemon thyme." He goes, "Diego, lemon thyme's for the Greeks," and then walked out again.
You ended up going back to Norway. Tell us about that decision and that period of time and what it was like going back there after sort of acquiring skills.
Yeah, so it was always a plan to go back. I delayed it by a little bit when I got the Bilson's job, but then I came back here, moved to a smaller city called Trondheim, where my wife was in university at the time. So we'd spent 2.5 years apart at that point, and neither of us had any money, so we hadn't actually seen each other for the entire time. It was horrible, but so getting back was incredibly nice. I would have left behind the whole cooking world to get back to her at that point. It's but then Trondheim was now it's quite nice. There's a lot of good restaurants in Trondheim now, but when I went there was only really two, and they weren't at the same standard that they are now. So I ended up working, I think, at this little bar and grill for 6 months while I waited for a job to open up at one of those two good restaurants. And that was a place called Fembord, which just means 5 tables. That's all we had, And there were 2 of us in the kitchen and one guy in the front of us. So we did all of the front of house work and all of the serving as well as the cooking. I think we just had a 10-course menu or something like that, but that was very, very formative for me for learning how to work as a little bit more sort of whole, if that makes sense, to be able to see how a restaurant works, at a sort of the complete picture of it rather than just what's going on in the kitchen. And then I was there for a couple of years, and then got offered at the end of 2013 to come down to Maaemo, which happened actually in a little bit of it was a very typically Espen way to offer somebody a job to start with, because I'd applied to start because the restaurant I was working at was closing. So I thought, okay, well, next year I don't have anything to do yet. I'll see if I can go to Maaemo for a month. It was an incredibly exciting place, and so I think it was I was in sort of October or something like that. The restaurant was going to close in December. Like I said, there was only 2 of us in the kitchen, and I had a 3-month notice period. And I got a phone call from Espen one morning, offering me a job to start immediately. And I was shitting myself, it was because I didn't want to turn it down. But then my boss wouldn't let me out of my contract, and I lived in a different city, and because he said to me, do you want to start straight away? I just had a guy that fell down the stairs, and he can't work at the moment. I said, I would love to, but I live in Trondheim. He didn't miss a beat. He just goes, well, I guess you need to move. So I couldn't get out of my contract, and I was so upset, and I called Espen back to tell him, and he goes, yeah, no problem. I have 14 spaces available for people in February, so just come then.
You've built your career there over many years now. How would you describe the food scene there, and indeed sort of Nordic cuisine, to those that haven't been there?
I think Oslo is an incredibly sort of vibrant place to be now when it comes to restaurants. It's changed a lot in the last 10, 11 years. There's a lot of, I think it's the same as kind of anywhere else, that there was this wave of cooks that worked in fine dining and brought all these wonderful techniques and an approach to produce sourcing to the mid market and to the lower end as well. So Oslo has a fantastic amount of really good, not so expensive restaurants now, where people are cooking great pasta or grilled food and doing it with the same care that they did when they were in Maaemo or one of the other really good sort of fine dining places that are around. So, and we have a lot more people that have come to Oslo to work at Maaemo, for example, and have decided to stay. Maybe picked up a Norwegian partner or realized that life over here is quite nice, and then decided to stay and open up something personal, which I think is lovely. We missed that 10 years ago.
You've built an incredible career over there and an amazing reputation for the restaurant. What sort of advice would you have for a really young chef that might have a goal in mind to get to that 3 Michelin star one day? What's kind of needed along the path to sort of get to a really high level like that?
I think, obviously is the cliche of, hard work pays off, but that it's cliche for a reason. It's you have to be committed. I don't think we live in a world anymore where you have to expect everybody to work 16 hours a day. Nobody wants that, but be willing to be present, to work hard, and to give your concentration and thought to what you're doing. Learn to kind of read what a restaurant and what a kitchen's rhythm is. So you don't want to be the guy that comes in and works at a pace that's 80% of what everyone else is giving, because you're never going to get ahead that way. So I think you need to find the pace of the restaurant that you're in and try and outwork people by 10%, because that's how you're going to get better and how you're going to develop as a chef. And I think that it's not necessarily the ideal path to try and go straight into fine dining. And for me, I still think, honestly, the best stepping stone for me was that 6 months at Rockpool Bar and Grill. You learn to cook good food. You learn proper techniques, things that you're going to carry with you for the rest of your life, and then after that, you can go into the more specialized stuff. And Maaemo is a finishing school for chefs. It's we expect you to know all the basics already and know how to hold yourself in a restaurant, and then once you know that, we can teach you the way that we do it. But you need to have a solid base for that to work.
Well, I know you're on the cusp of doing these amazing dinners with Brian at Barara Waters. So what are you looking forward to for those pop-up dinners?
One of the things I look forward to most about going to Barara is getting in there early in the morning and standing in the dining room with a coffee and looking at the water. That's for me, that's an incredible thing. But apart from that nostalgic bit, then it's I can't wait to get in and taste all of the native ingredients. It's when I worked in Sydney, it was not wasn't so much of it around. It was finger lime that we used, or maybe some salt bush or something like that. So every time I come back now and there's a greater variety of things that are available, it's just incredibly exciting to taste. So I think the first couple of days where we get ready for what's coming and finalizing the dishes. So being able to taste all of these things that all of these dishes that I know, I've spent time developing, tasting them with a different set of ingredients to find out how different they are, it is going to be very, very fun.
Well, I think it's going to be a lot of fun for the guests as well, and look forward to having you back down in Australia, and an absolute honour to have you on Deep in the Weeds today. Please keep in touch and we'll catch up again soon.
My pleasure completely.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Stay safe and be well.